Listen to this carefully, because what Jordan Peterson discovered about the inevitable psychological collapse of narcissists will fundamentally change how you understand the nature of self-destruction and the iron laws of human psychology. Narcissists don't fail because of external forces or bad luck. They crumble under the accumulated weight of their own psychological contradictions, like architectural structures that violate basic engineering principles and inevitably collapse under their own mass. Peterson revealed that there is a specific psychological formula for this self-destruction, a sequence of internal pressures that build over decades until the entire personality structure simply cannot support its own weight anymore. What you're going to learn about this process will shock you about the inexorable nature of psychological laws and why some people are literally destined to destroy themselves through their own choices. If you want to understand what's really happening inside the mind of a narcissist when the mask falls, subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment down below if you already suspected that one day this collapse would happen. The concept of narcissists crumbling under their own weight isn't metaphorical. It's a precise psychological phenomenon that Peterson compares to structural engineering failures. Just as buildings that violate fundamental principles of physics will eventually collapse under their own mass, narcissists create personality structures that violate fundamental principles of human psychology and inevitably experience structural failure. Peterson, drawing on profound understanding of personality psychology and decades of clinical observation, discovered that narcissists build what he calls inverted psychological architecture, personality structures where the foundation is weak and unstable, while the superstructure is massive and demanding. It's like trying to build a skyscraper on quicksand. It may stand for a while, but collapse is inevitable. The foundation of healthy personality is authentic self-knowledge, genuine empathy, and sustainable relationships. Narcissists instead build on a foundation of self-deception, manipulated relationships, and external validation. This foundation cannot support the massive superstructure of grandiose identity, complex manipulation systems, and elaborate defense mechanisms that they construct on top of it. Imagine for a moment trying to maintain not just one lie about yourself, but hundreds of interconnected lies, each requiring additional lies for support. Each relationship requiring different performances, every interaction demanding psychological energy to maintain facades. Now imagine doing this for decades while the contradictions multiply and the energy demands increase exponentially. But can you imagine the psychological stress of maintaining an identity that is fundamentally at odds with reality? According to recent studies in neuropsychology, narcissists expend enormous amounts of mental energy daily just maintaining their defensive systems. It's like running complex software on a computer that lacks sufficient processing power. Eventually, system failure is inevitable. It's not just unsustainable, it's actively self-defeating. Every lie requires more lies. Every manipulation creates more enemies. Every destroyed relationship reduces available support. Over time, the system becomes so complex and unstable that even minor stresses can trigger complete collapse. And then, the weight becomes unbearable. Peterson describes this moment as one of the most predictable yet devastating experiences in human psychology. It's predictable because it follows psychological laws that are as consistent as physical laws. Yet it's devastating because when it happens, narcissists experience it as completely unexpected. They've been so focused on maintaining their facades that they never recognize the structural instability they were creating. The first component of this self-destruction, which Peterson calls credibility erosion, involves the gradual loss of believability that occurs when someone consistently prioritizes manipulation over truth. Initially, narcissists may be quite successful in their manipulations, but over time people begin to see patterns. Stories don't match. Behaviors contradict claims. Promises are repeatedly broken. This erosion doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process where increasing numbers of people stop believing, stop trusting, stop investing in relationship with the narcissist. Each lost relationship represents not just social isolation, but loss of a source of validation that the narcissist requires for psychological functioning. Peterson documented how narcissists in this stage often become increasingly desperate in their attempts to regain credibility, but their desperation itself becomes evidence of their instability. It's a vicious cycle. The more they try to convince people they're trustworthy, the more obvious it becomes that they're not. But can narcissists recognize when their credibility is eroding? Or are they psychologically blind to this process? Peterson's research reveals that most are genuinely unaware of how their patterns of behavior systematically destroy their own credibility over time. They may notice that people seem more difficult or more suspicious than they used to be, but they typically attribute this to external factors rather than recognizing their own role in creating mistrust. It's like someone driving drunk who wonders why everyone else on the road seems to be driving erratically. Can you imagine being psychologically incapable of recognizing that your own behavior patterns are systematically destroying your credibility with others? Peterson explains that the same psychological mechanisms that allow narcissists to manipulate others also prevent them from accurately assessing how others perceive them. Leave in the comments if you've observed someone seemingly unaware that their credibility has been completely destroyed through their own actions. The second component, which Peterson calls psychological debt accumulation, involves the mounting internal contradictions that narcissists must maintain to sustain their grandiose self-image. Every act of manipulation requires psychological energy to justify. Every destroyed relationship demands elaborate explanations. Every failure needs creative reframing to maintain the illusion of superiority. Peterson discovered that narcissists develop what he calls contradiction maintenance systems, complex mental frameworks designed to hold multiple opposing truths simultaneously without conscious awareness of the contradictions. But maintaining these systems requires increasing amounts of cognitive energy over time. It's like juggling while riding a unicycle while reciting poetry, initially challenging but manageable. But as you add more elements, the cognitive load becomes overwhelming. Eventually, even the most skilled psychological juggler drops everything at once. But what happens when decades of accumulated psychological debt suddenly comes due will shock you profoundly. Peterson revealed that narcissists experiencing this collapse often describe it as feeling like waking up in a house of cards during an earthquake and suddenly recognizing that everything they believed about themselves was precariously balanced and is now collapsing simultaneously. And here's the most terrifying part. According to Peterson, many narcissists experience what he calls weight recognition, a sudden, overwhelming awareness of how much psychological energy they've been expending just to maintain their false identity, and the crushing realization that they can no longer sustain that effort. It's like someone who has been holding their breath for decades, suddenly becoming conscious of their need for oxygen. Except in this case, what they need is authentic relationship and genuine self-knowledge, which their entire personality structure has been designed to avoid. Can you imagine suddenly realizing that you've spent your entire adult life expending enormous energy to maintain an identity that was fundamentally false, and that you no longer have the strength to continue? Peterson describes this as one of the most psychologically devastating realizations a human being can experience. But let me tell you something that will completely change your perspective on narcissistic self-destruction. According to Peterson's research, there is a crucial difference between narcissists who crumble under their own weight and never recover, and those who somehow manage to use the collapse as an opportunity for genuine personality reconstruction. The difference lies in what Peterson calls structural flexibility, the capacity to maintain some sense of coherent identity while undergoing complete personality restructuring. It's an extraordinarily rare psychological skill that requires enormous tolerance for uncertainty and discomfort. Peterson argues that this flexibility cannot be developed after collapse begins. It either exists as a dormant psychological resource or it doesn't. This means that the outcome of narcissistic collapse is largely predetermined by personality factors that existed long before the weight became unbearable, and then arises a question that few have the courage to explore. If collapse under their own weight is inevitable for most narcissists, what does this mean for the people who have been systematically harmed by their behavior? Peterson suggests that most victims will witness their abuser's eventual self-destruction, but this destruction may not provide the satisfaction or closure that victims hope for. Sometimes, watching someone crumble under the weight of their own contradictions can be more disturbing than satisfying, especially when that person is someone you once cared about or hoped would change. But here's something that will leave you completely disturbed. Peterson revealed that even narcissists, who appear to genuinely crumble under their own weight, often find ways to use their collapse experience as a new source of narcissistic supply. They become the collapsed narcissist who talks extensively about their psychological breakdown, who shares insights about their own structural failures, who uses their apparent vulnerability and self-awareness as a way to gain sympathy and attention. It's narcissism rebuilt around the narrative of having experienced profound collapse. Peterson describes this as collapse narcissism, narcissism that incorporates the language of psychological breakdown while maintaining the fundamental dynamic of requiring external validation for identity maintenance. It's perhaps the most sophisticated form of narcissism because it appears so genuine and self-aware. Leave down below what you think. Is it possible for a narcissist to genuinely crumble under their own weight without turning that experience into a new performance? Peterson's answer is deeply pessimistic. He documents extraordinarily rare cases where narcissists, after genuine collapse, withdraw completely from seeking recognition for their psychological insights or breakdown experience. They don't talk about their collapse, don't seek credit for their suffering, don't try to gain sympathy through sharing their story of psychological destruction. Instead, they quietly dedicate whatever psychological resources remain to practical actions that minimize harm and, when possible, make concrete amends without expectation of recognition or forgiveness. Their collapse becomes functional rather than performative, but this kind of authentic, structural collapse without performance is so uncommon that Peterson estimates it occurs in less than 0.1% of narcissists who experience genuine psychological breakdown under their own weight. And here's something that no one tells you about narcissistic self-destruction. It can be extremely traumatic for family members to witness. Seeing someone you care about literally crumble under the weight of their own psychological contradictions, even when that collapse is inevitable and necessary, can create lasting trauma in observers. Peterson frequently works not only with narcissists who have collapsed, but with their families who are trying to process the experience of watching someone they love destroy themselves through their own psychological architecture. What you're going to discover now will transform your understanding of psychological inevitability and personal responsibility. Peterson revealed that narcissistic self-destruction follows patterns so consistent that they can be predicted with remarkable accuracy once certain psychological conditions are met. The weight of maintaining grandiose identity plus complex manipulation systems plus elaborate defense mechanisms, all built on a foundation of self-deception, will inevitably exceed the carrying capacity of any human psychological structure. It's not a moral judgment, it's a psychological law, as reliable as gravity. This means that narcissists are not evil people who deserve punishment. They are people who have constructed personalities that violate basic psychological engineering principles and will inevitably collapse under their own structural contradictions. Peterson also warns about something profound. Our contemporary society may be creating conditions that allow narcissistic personality structures to become even more elaborate and unstable before collapse occurs, potentially making the eventual breakdown even more devastating when it finally happens. Social media provides unlimited validation sources, enabling narcissists to build even more elaborate, grandiose identities. Political polarization allows people to maintain contradictory beliefs without challenge. Therapeutic cultures that avoid confrontation enable people to maintain self-deception while believing they are growing. And here's the final truth that will reshape your understanding of human psychology. Narcissistic collapse under their own weight is not something to celebrate or await with anticipation. It's a predictable psychological phenomenon that teaches us about the natural consequences of violating basic principles of healthy personality development. The ultimate wisdom lies in understanding that while psychological laws will inevitably assert themselves in others' lives, your healing and protection cannot depend on witnessing their collapse. Build your life, your relationships, your sense of security in ways that are completely independent of whether narcissists in your life eventually crumble under their own weight, because true psychological health comes not from watching others destroy themselves through their own contradictions, but from building your own personality structure on authentic foundations that can support genuine relationships, honest self-knowledge, and sustainable growth throughout your entire life. Real strength emerges when you understand that their inevitable collapse is their journey, not yours. Your journey is about building psychological architecture so solid and well-engineered that it remains stable regardless of the chaos created by those whose structures are doomed to fail. If you've made it this far, you're beginning to understand that psychological laws operate with mathematical precision, but your well-being doesn't need to wait for those laws to manifest in others' lives. In the next video, we're going to explore something even more profound: how Jordan Peterson analyzes the narcissist's mirror when they finally confront their own darkness, and why this confrontation can be either transformative or completely destructive. Subscribe and activate notifications, because this journey is revealing timeless truths about psychology that will forever change how you understand the relationship between self-deception, structural integrity, and the inevitable consequences of our psychological choices.